All right, all right. Welcome to the third episode of Dynasty 365, the Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast of fantasyandframes.com and the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network. I'm Brian Ford, and I'm joined by my co-host Tyler Heil. Tyler, how are you?
I'm wonderful, man. I'm excited to talk some combine and some hand sizes and get this going with Joe and Keith.
Right on. Yeah, so let's talk about that. We are joined tonight by fellow Four-Eyed family members, Joe and Keith.
The new guys.
Yes, they are the co-hosts of the DFS podcast Daily Fix, and they're also going to be on with us for a few weeks here talking prospects. So before we get to prospects, right, tell us what we are going to expect from Daily Fix when it comes around.
We do and this is Keith, by the way. We do a weekly podcast during the daily fantasy football season, where we give you high, middle, and low tier plays at each position. Me and Joe both are big into obviously daily fantasy, and if you listen to a lot of podcasts or read a lot of articles, there's not much variation in the picks that people give week to week. They love to give the obvious picks, usually in the medium to high price range, but you never hear the low plays, which that is where you win money on DraftKings and FanDuel, is by hitting a home run with your lower plays. And, me and Joe are both analytical guys. We look at it a lot by numbers, and we had a lot of success the last couple of years. We did really good in the Super Bowl captains lineup, and just going to try to win people some money, right, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, historically, we're better at helping other people win money than we are winning ourselves, especially in my case. So, always happy to help other people.
So you both love the prospect angle of football, and it is the season in the dynasty cycle where we're all looking at the prospects as we run up to the draft. So tell me a little bit about what you love about or why you were drawn to the particularly the prospect angle of things.
I mean, speaking just as a Giants fan, I tend to be interested every year because my team's drafting very high. But from a fantasy angle, I think whatever type of fantasy you're playing, whether that's, season long where you're redrafting, whether you're doing, obviously if you're doing Dynasty, it matters a lot. But even with daily, it matters because if you feel confident someone's going to be good, you can make a lot, especially early on, because the pricing in daily fantasy, if you are in on a guy early, you can really take advantage of that. And I think the other thing is, it's not just the rookies that year. Like, if you, in the back of your mind, you're like, I remember this guy, I liked him as a prospect, I think he can go off later, because most guys don't break out their rookie seasons. Like Deontay Johnson was the guy I really liked coming out. And so in his second season, when Keith and I first started doing this, very early on, I was like, Deontay Johnson, he's super low priced. This guy's the best receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Use him every week until they adjust the price. And that worked out really well. So I think, whatever type of fantasy you're doing, it helps to have that knowledge.
Right on. Yeah. Keith, what about you and prospects? What draws you to it?
Well, I mean, I love college football. I still think in its purest form, it's the best season of any sport that there is, because every game is so important. They're diluting that a little bit as they get to the 4 teams, but it's still so important compared to every other league where you can have a bad week and it can't be the end of your season. And then it's just one of the hardest things to do. I mean, look at general managers who are paid ungodly amounts of money to build rosters, and it's a crapshoot to them. So just to kind of be able to, in your head, come up with prospects and try to figure out, because it's a lot of times the teams that take risks that end up being really successful, and it's not kind of going by the board or just by needs or and it's fun to be involved with that, have your takes on guys. And as Joe said, obviously for season long, I'm going to get into Dynasty just because I've been listening to your guys' stuff. It's great. I want to do it now. I've never done a Dynasty league, but in all forms of fantasy football, and give you a huge leg up.
Yeah. So, all right, we got our juices flowing for the prospects. We're going to do a post-combine reaction tonight. But first, news and notes. So we got a lot of stuff going on around the NFL today. It was franchise tag day. A couple big quarterbacks in the news. Let's start with Rodgers re-signing with the Packers with pretend monopoly money because they're supposed to not have any. I'm going to go to my resident capologist. Tyler, what do you make of this?
I mean, as a football move, is great. It might seem hot takey, but you want a back-to-back MVP on your roster. That's something that's nice to have. But cap-wise, this is actually going to help them with the cap, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all the cap numbers haven't come out yet. Right now, Aaron Rodgers has a $46 million cap hit on the season. I would assume this extension is going to reduce some of his base salary for this year. It's good. I think I saw like 150 million guaranteed or something. Obviously, all those numbers haven't come out yet. But yeah, so when you do the guarantees, it'll spread it out through the rest of the contract. It'll lower the cap hit for this year, which will be good. Davante Adams, he hasn't signed his franchise tag. They've placed the franchise tag on him. So that this just gives them more time to negotiate a long-term deal with him. And, it just maybe even lower his cap number for the year, even if they pay him $30 million a year, which they're probably going to for at least 3 years. So, I mean, dynasty-wise, this is great for both of their value. I'll be bumping Davante up my rankings a little bit, regardless of age. He's going to produce at an elite level for 3 more years, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to fix it.
I had some uncertainty built into where I ranked both of them, and so I'll probably give him a bump. But let's say hi to El Jefe, the CEO, Jorge, checking in. We're supposed to be giving you a night off now that we know how to do all the tech, and here you are saying hi. But always good to see Jorge around, and glad you're watching us to make sure we don't destroy the brand. So the next big news was the Russell Wilson trade to Denver. Huge package delivered for Russ. And this has ripple effects for a lot of players. So Joe, what do you make of this trade? Give me your quick take on things.
I mean, definitely the funniest part of this trade is the biggest get for Seattle is the number 9 pick. And if they'd never traded for Jamal Adams, they would already have the number 10 pick. So I just enjoy the schadenfreude of that. But I mean, good Lord, the AFC West. I don't know if Josh McDaniels is feeling so good about taking that Raiders job right now, where he's stuck with the fourth best quarterback in the division. But yeah, every one of those games is like must-see TV now. Seattle, yeah, I can't say I agree with what looks like choosing Pete Carroll over Russell Wilson, especially when you look at the landscape in the NFC right now, where it's kind of like you have Green Bay, you have the Rams, and then I guess Dallas, but it's a lot more wide open. So I'm not sure I would have rebuilt right now, but that's the path they decided to go down. And obviously great for all the Broncos wide receivers. And we're talking fantasy. This is exciting times there.
See, I don't think that's so obvious, right?
No,
I don't. So I've kind of always been meh on these pass catchers until I see things sort of settle in more. Yeah, they're getting Russ, right? But, I don't know. They've got Patrick, Judy, Sutton. Sutton was kind of a forgotten man last year. I don't know what the new regime is going to do, but I can't imagine they're not going to lean on the running game when you have like Javonte Williams there and possibly even bringing Gordon back. I think it's kind of like a little bit of mouths to feed, a little bit of like lean on the run game. I'm just a little cautious. I don't think I'm so quick to say to the moon for any of these guys personally. Tyler, I think you disagree.
I do. And the reason being is, Russell Wilson is a good quarterback. He helps wide receivers produce. He's had DK Metcalf, he's had Tyler Lockett, who's been, I don't know off the top of my head, but at least a wide receiver 2 for 3 to 4 straight seasons. He's been great. And, Jerry Judy's going to fit well with him. He's going to run some of these intermediate routes. Sutton, I'm pretty excited about. Even KJ Hamler, I'm pretty excited about because, say what you want about Russ Wilson, but he has one of the best deep balls in the NFL.
Yes.
That moon ball he can throw is gorgeous. And Cortland Sutton's going to really benefit from that. He was the forgotten man last year because his game didn't match up with Teddy Bridgewater.
True.
I think he was the wide receiver 15 the year before his injury when he had people like Joe Flacco throwing him the ball. So, I feel pretty good about some of these Denver weapons, primarily Sutton and Judy. I'm not crazy about Tim Patrick. Alberto's interesting. But
yes, very. I scooped up a lot of Alberto recently, and now it's paying off. Keith, real quick, your take on the trade.
I actually think it's a win for both teams. Seattle's in the toughest division in football. They haven't had that much success.
They were in the toughest division in football.
You don't think that they're still going to be? Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I was going to be like, I think the rest of the teams are still be pretty good. And why not rebuild? I think it's a good time to do that. This is a win, obviously, for Denver, but I'm very curious to see, what Russell can do in that kind of, because in the heyday of the NFC West, there was never great quarterbacks in his own division. There was really good teams, but there wasn't great quarterbacks. There are great quarterbacks in the AFC West, and it's going to be interesting to see how he goes toe-to-toe to them. The big winner for me on the Broncos, though, is Javonte Williams, who I just think, I know me and Joe both said all of last year we were on him early. Dude is a stud. Mm-hmm. And even if Melvin Gordon comes back, I don't care. If you look down the stretch, he started to do everything more but score. I think that changes this year, but he was a machine. I think he averaged like almost 4 catches a game for his last 7, over 50 yards, close to 5 yards a carry. He's going to have a lot easier time, no offense to Teddy Bridgewater, running with Russell Wilson at quarterback than he did with Teddy or any of those other guys. The Broncos run, and if Melvin Gordon comes back, I like him too next year for fantasy as well. But I really think this is a win-win for both. They got a huge haul. I know it's Russell Wilson, but they got a huge haul.
Anybody want to give me a quick take on what this means for the Seahawks now? Right now, they have Geno Smith and Drew Lock as quarterbacks.
Baby.
What are we doing with DK and Lockett?
Yeah, so DK is, but both stock down. That's the quick takeaway from it. Mm-hmm. DK is still a young dude. He's still extremely talented. Tyler Lockett that's a conundrum, man. He's going to be 30 years old soon. He's not going to have a good season with either Drew Lock or Geno Smith. I don't envision the Seahawks going out and trading for a Jimmy G who's, the Niners aren't going to trade him in their division anyway. Mm-hmm. So I just don't see a lot of upside for the Seahawks passing game in this coming season, barring them taking like a Malik Willis at pick number 9, and maybe he is ready to play very soon. I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of Liberty University football, just like most of America. But I don't know if he can jump from Liberty to the NFL and produce high-end fantasy wide receivers in DK and Lockett. So, I don't feel good about either of them.
More on Willis coming up. Joe.
Oh, I was just going to say, the one guy, if they bring him back, and I know they want to, who could potentially benefit is Rashad Penny, because Pete Carroll always wants to run the ball more than he probably should. So now that he actually has QBs that aren't good, I could see him just doubling down on that even more. And so Penny or whoever the running back is in Seattle could be the one potential beneficiary.
Don't underestimate, though, the fact that bad teams throw a lot. And if the Seahawks end up being bad, I don't necessarily think that's terrible for Metcalf, who is a guy that with his size and speed, he's going to get a lot of targets no matter what the situation, who the quarterback is. And if your team's down a lot, which we think Seattle probably will be next year, that can be more opportunities. And that's the kind of thing I normally look for. I mean, obviously he's not going to have the same value that he has in previous years, but I don't think there's going to be the drop off that, necessarily everybody thinks.
Okay, fair enough. So moving on to more news, we're going to look at some free agents. My Josh Palmer shares are getting nervous with Mike Williams re-signing, but we want to get into the franchise tag. So there's a bunch today. We've already kind of covered Adams. We're going to highlight 3 of them, and Joe's going to kick us off with Dalton Schultz.
Yes, this is just an interesting one to me because the Cowboys are another team that's in some version of cap hell. And so they're bringing back Schultz on the franchise tag, which runs just under $11 million for tight ends. But they're going to watch Michael Gallup walk, and they're going to cut Amari Cooper, it seems like, in the next couple days here. And so it's just interesting the way they prioritize this because they still have Blake Jarwin, who's a capable tight end. And it just seems like they've prioritized the way Kellen Moore likes to be able to vary formations with the offense more than maybe the high-end talent of an Amari Cooper.
Didn't you think
I just
Cedric
think it's kind of a
Wilson looked good, though,
fascinating.
Joe?
What's that?
Didn't you think Cedric Wilson looked good down the stretch? I thought he was really impressive.
He did, although you're betting a lot on Dak just to elevate guys and people like Cedric Wilson to come through. If you're going to have Amari Cooper and Gallup both leave, obviously I think CeeDee Lamb's great, and this is probably the best news for him fantasy wise. So that's good, but I think it's an interesting move from them from a team building standpoint.
Do they run a lot, Joe, too, out of a 2 tight end set? Is that part of it? Because you think they're going to run a lot with Pollard and Elliott as well.
Ideally, if you're the Cowboys, you would not have re-signed Zeke to a huge contract, and you'd keep all these guys who actually make your offense run. But as a Giants fan, I applaud the Joneses for their team management.
So moving on to another tight end, I think Tyler and I are going to tag team this one. David Njoku. I was really disappointed to see this one. Hashtag free Njoku. I had a couple really good landing spots for him. I thought there's a tight end logjam there. They're a run heavy team with a meh quarterback. And then they go and tag him. Let's turn to the Browns fan, Tyler. What are you making of all this?
Browns fan wise, I love this. This is a great dude to bring back. He's the most talented tight end on your roster. He can block, he can catch. He's an uber athlete. He can do it all. He is totally worth a franchise tag. He's worth $10-11 million a year as a tight end.
Okay.
That said, fantasy wise, I'm not excited. Baker can, if he can play at not the worst quarterback in the league levels, that would be great for David Njoku. But yeah, you're throwing David Njoku out there with Austin Hooper and Harrison Bryant. Yeah. Austin Hooper has 1 year left. Then I'm assuming the Browns will cut him and get rid of that contract number because they can't cut him this year. So, future-wise, David Njoku is 25 years old. I think Browns are going to find a way to re-sign him to a long-term deal. And whether they figure out the quarterback position by Baker playing at 2020 levels or if they find a new guy, I think this is good. This is good for Njoku's long-term value.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I kind of was obviously upset at first, and I even thought that Harrison Bryant was going to be a sneaky buy if Njoku left, but here we are. Okay, and we're going to wrap this up with talking about Chris Godwin. Coming off an injury, but still, good age, great skill. I'm kind of been like a Godwin my guy, over the years. I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, who's throwing him the ball? What say you, the frames? Let's bounce around the frames. Let's go to Joe, and then we'll go around the clock that way. And so you start us off.
I'm definitely with you on the Chris Godwin love. I think he's great. Whoever the QB is there, they will benefit from having him. But yeah, that's obviously the big question mark if you're looking at Chris Godwin or Mike Evans going into next year is who's manning the QB spot. Because, obviously Brady was as good as it gets, but even Jameis was the guy who was going to let the wide receivers eat. So we'll see if they can get someone who can keep that up.
All right. Keith, is this good or bad for Godwin right now, fantasy-wise?
Fantasy wise, it's probably bad for him. I don't totally understand why they franchised him from a team perspective, but he's coming off an ACL MCL injury, which is already a concern for me, and just the fact that Kyle Trask, I guess, right now is their starting quarterback, which as a Georgia fan, that's not good for the Buccaneers. But I mean, the one thing I guess you could hold on to is maybe this is a sign they think they can convince Brady to come back, which I do think he plays again. I don't think Brady's done.
Okay.
I just don't think it's in Tampa. It was a weird retirement, but I definitely think that Godwin's going to catch balls. He's a great wide receiver. I just obviously coming off an injury, we don't know who the quarterback is. I would be leery of making any moves for Godwin if you're in a dynasty league or drafting him early in a fantasy league next year unless we learn something new.
Right on. Tyler, what say you about Godwin? If you are a Godwin manager, how do you look at this?
I mean, I'm tepid, I guess, if that's a good word for it. Don't know their quarterback situation. I still think Brady could very well be back. But I totally understand why they did it. You don't let a 26-year-old, regardless of injury status, 26-year-old in his prime who's playing at a top 10 receiver level walk. At the very least, you tag him and trade him, although I don't think they intend to tag him. I think they're going to extend him long term. And Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is great for whatever quarterback you bring in. And I'm not assuming it's going to be Kyle Trask. So someone's going to come in and play quarterback for them at a professional level, and Chris Godwin will have a solid season because him and Evans are going to be absolutely peppered with targets.
Okay, and so let's round this out with before we get into the combine, with Calvin Ridley breaking Keith's heart as a Falcons fan. No matter what we think of like the penalties and how the NFL is a trash organization and all that, what I want to know is he's on your dynasty roster. What's the move? Is it a hold? Is it a take what you can get and run? Tyler, what are you doing with Ridley?
Personally, I'm holding him. I would not blame someone if they could get a early to mid second for him, maybe a second in 2023, and just cut your losses. I mean, he's already 27. He's gone for the entire year. He's going to be almost 29 by the time he comes back. I don't feel great about Calvin Ridley's value, and they haven't said that he's only going to be suspended for this year. The NFL takes betting very seriously. They take the quality of the game very seriously, and they do not want the quality of that game put into question by any of their players betting. No, that's made very clear to all of them that work for these teams. So I would assume that it'll just be a 1-year suspension, but he could never play football again. And I don't think that's saying anything too crazy.
Yeah, I haven't seen him go for around that 2023 second that you talked about, although I would push for it. What I did settle for in one league where I thought it made sense to move him was my guy, Brevin Jordan, and a 2023 third. So, yeah, I mean, if you're high on Jordan like I am, makes sense. If you're the rest of the world, maybe not, right? Okay, so what you all came for is the combine reactions, all right? So we had the combine over the weekend. The dust settled, and we're gonna take it in chunks, sort of like we're gonna talk about the value of the combine, what we thought going in, what we saw, and if we get to it, what we're thinking coming out. So let's talk about the relative importance or not of the combine. I think we were talking before the show, we're all in the kind of the same ballpark, kind of trying to deflate the hype a little bit. But our prospect guys, our guests, Joe and Keith, why don't you tell us what you think about the combine's importance?
I personally think that the combine is something that should either solidify a thought that you have on a guy, or maybe, I mean, if they either grade off the chart, that they put up unbelievable numbers, maybe it can change your opinion a little bit. Or obviously, if they do really bad, it can change your opinion. But I'm really more looking for the guys that I'm questionable about, because most people that I have a high opinion on, I go more by, just what I see. I believe so much in performance on the field. Like, I just think that is, especially when you're playing at a high level, such a huge indicator. As an Atlanta Falcons fan, watching us draft these guys from small schools in the TD era and watch them be bust after bust after bust, where you see these guys that play in the SEC or the Big Ten continuously, who performed well in college against real competition, be successful. I'm just looking at it as a gauge to sort of confirm my opinions. Is it fun? Sure. It gives you something to do. The NFL has done an unbelievable job of making, NFL a 12-month season. And this is kind of the start of a new season. And, they hype it up and everything. But, I mean, to Tyler's point earlier, we're talking about a guy's hand size. Like, that's leading the NFL show in the morning. That's when you kind of know it's a little bit too much and overhyped. But it's a lot of fun. So, it gives us stuff to make podcasts and TV shows and et cetera.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, like Keith said, I think you're primarily, as far as testing goes, you're looking to either confirm what you know, or if something surprises you, you go back, you double check it, kind of see, did you miss something? Obviously, if you talk to anyone who works for teams or is an expert on this, they'll say it's the medicals, it's the meeting with players. That's the primary reason the combine exists. I will say the one guys that I think the testing matters a little extra for is the smaller school guys.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have that question of, it's, easier to beat lower end D1 or D2 players versus the NFL. Whereas, if I've seen a guy play Alabama and Georgia, I know what he looks like against that kind of talent. So I think it's helpful to get a gauge on exactly where those guys from the smaller schools land athletically versus the other players.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to all pick one guy that we thought going in was an interesting story. Maybe had a lot to win or lose based on the combine performance. So, Tyler, we're going to start with you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and say Desmond Ridder. I don't know if he went in with a ton to win, a ton to lose, but these quarterbacks are, put them in a hat and shake it up. You don't know which order they're going to come out in. There is not a consensus QB1 from any of these evaluators at the professional level or anything like that. But I think it was very important for Desmond Ridder. Everyone can watch his film. They see he's a solid quarterback. He can deliver the ball. He does a good job with that. But and everyone knew that he was a good athlete, but I don't think people knew that he was a 4-5 type athlete. And that's huge for the NFL right now. Coaches are scheming really well, but one of the biggest things that you can have in your toolbox as a quarterback is being able to extend a play and work some magic and escape from the pocket. And you see a guy like Desmond Ridder come out there, the kind of the pocket passer from Cincinnati, come out and run a 4-5. You're like, whoa, this guy can actually move. I don't think anyone's going to confuse him for Lamar Jackson, and they're not going to go into a team and design a running game around him. But he's going to be able to do stuff like Joe Burrow can. Joe Burrow can move around in the pocket. He can run out and he can boot left. He can boot right. He can run nakeds. He can extend the play and allow his receivers to get open. And having speed like that will just give Desmond Ridder the opportunity to do that. And a lot of these guys are, they're tied. They're really, really close in these rankings. And that might just give him a little bit of a leg up on that next guy.
Saw a couple places say that Ridder bought himself a ticket to first-round draft capital. I don't necessarily buy that, but it might be a bit of an overreaction. Joe or Keith, anything on Ridder?
No, I think I'm good with what he said.
Okay, right on. My guy is going to be Jalen Tolbert. So I saw article, a couple pieces a while back, that were giving him positive spin, and called him. He's going to be a draft day steal for both the NFL draft and where you get him in your dynasty rookie drafts. So I paid attention. and I looked into it, and he's a guy where he was kind of becoming kind of like a little bit of a my guy early on in this process. So I looked at him and I said, okay, going into this combine, he's from a group of 5, so a smaller school, right? And he's had some concentration drops, right? So what I want him to do in this combine is not do anything that gives anybody any more ammo besides those 2 knocks to really, push him down. And he didn't do that. He didn't hurt himself, and that's all I could ask, right? I think he ran a good enough 40 and everything, and I think he probably still has day 2 capital, and that's what I wanted if I'm going to think about taking him in my rookie draft. Who's next? Joe, who was your guy going in?
Damian Pierce, the Florida running back. I'd seen in a couple spots, I believe PFF and Lance Zierlein of NFL.com both had him coming in as the number 3 running back in this class. And he's a guy who never had more than 106 carries in a season, so he's never been that bell cow. He's not your obvious top of the line running back. So I felt like, and one of the knocks on him was, he didn't necessarily have the long speed that you're hoping to get from your running back. And so I thought, he had the chance, if he had a good showing, he could really lock himself into that 3rd running back spot, maybe be a 2nd round pick.
And you think he did?
I think he froze.
Oh, okay. I was like, okay, you're going to leave us on a cliffhanger there. All right, Keith, who was your guy coming in that you were like, I want to see this, the way this story plays out?
Well, I mean, Malik Willis, I thought he had a lot of momentum coming from the Senior Bowl, and he's got a lot of disadvantages, obviously coming from a smaller school. But the quarterback class is wide open, and this is still a quarterback league. We know at the end of the day, somebody's going to panic and draft one of these guys relatively early, if not multiple guys relatively early. And I really thought it was brilliant for him not to run, because it put pressure, obviously, on his throwing session, because we all know he's really fast. And he would have that to fall back on if he, say, had a bad throwing session. But instead, he got the best of both worlds, where he looked good throwing the ball, and we know he's still really fast. And that's what got all the attention, because he didn't run. Because obviously we'd be talking about, potentially a sub 4.40 time, which, some are predicting he's going to be able to run. I just think on the heels of the Senior Bowl, this has been, just a perfect game plan. It reminds me a lot of Trey Lance too.
Joe, you're back?
Yeah, not sure what happened to me there, but
I want
you left us in suspense, buddy.
Everyone's dying to hear about Damian Pierce. But yeah, Florida running back, never really been the bell cow, was getting hyped as the number 3 running back in this class. So I thought, if he had a good showing, he's 220 pounds. So for him, I think if he'd run like the low 4.5s, then he's locking himself in there. Ended up being a 4.59 guy. I think it's probably a little bit disappointing, just because, his athletic testing ended up being pretty much exactly the same as Tyler Algier from BYU. And you want to be above that if you're going to be the 3rd running back. So I think he ends up being a mid to late day 2 pick, but he had the chance to give himself more if he'd been a little more impressive.
Okay. I'm going to need somebody at some point, maybe a little later in the show, need to give me more confidence about Malik Willis. So
I don't have a lot of confidence.
Likewise.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So here's the deal. We're going to go through we're going to pop around the frames again. This time it's who helped their stock the most. Like who do you think really impressed and sort of leveled up to maybe from day 3 to day 2 draft capital, et cetera, right? So let's start with Tyler, and we'll go clockwise through the frames, and I'm going to close it out with a fun one.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to kind of echo what Joe was talking about a little bit here and say I think Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker really both helped themselves a lot just with their testing numbers. I know you're not going to have any huge swings with these testing numbers, but they were both extremely explosive. Both ran. Breece Hall didn't run the 40, but Kenny Walker did. He ran really fast. Breece Hall had a 40-inch vert, which is just bonkers. And with that combined with Isaiah Spiller not looking extremely explosive, I think he had a 30-inch vert, which still, way better than I could do. But for a running back, I feel like they really gave themselves the top 2 ranking there and kind of put Isaiah Spiller a little bit out of the picture. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not willing to say first round capital yet, but I think it's a race between those two, and they're going to be the top 2 running backs picked.
Okay. Keith, who did the job for you?
Calvin Austin III from Memphis, the wide receiver.
Awesome.
5'8", 175 pounds. A lot of people are obviously legitimately worried that he's just too undersized. But what helps undersized concerns is going out and running a 4.32 40, having an 11-foot 3-inch broad jump, which when you think about that for a guy that size, it is freaking incredible. I was high on Austin beforehand. If you watched any games of him, particularly last season, he's actually a really good down the field receiver. He can catch the ball in traffic. He's got good hands. So to see this kind of speed and athleticism, Joe made fun of me for even bringing it up, but it does remind me a little bit of Tyra Gill, who is 5'9", 186 pounds. I just want to remind everyone, it's not like, 5'9", 186, ran very similar numbers. And I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be Tyreek Hill, but I think he did enough to where he's going to move up and get picked either in the second or maybe early third round. And we'll see if he, can be Tyreek Hill light or the next Tavon Austin. But either way, he has got unbelievable speed, and he can be a difference maker.
Okay, I'm going to put a pin in something there. Maybe we'll get back to it. I want to talk about wide receiver size in 2022. Joe, who was your guy who you think
speaking of wide receiver size, Christian Watson from North Dakota State.
Okay.
6'5", 208, big guy. Like I said earlier, I think the key for a guy like him, because North Dakota State, that's FCS, he averaged 4.3 yards per route, according to PFF, which is an absurd number. But again, it's FCS, so you have questions. Goes to the combine and just lights it up. 4.36, which again, this is a guy who's over 200 pounds. He's running a 4.36. His broad jump, 11 feet, 4 inches. It was the longest jump of any of the wide receivers. He had as impressive of a combine as anybody there. And so I think he's now he's getting drafted on day 2. I think it's just a question of when.
Okay. I don't disagree that he's going to be on day 2. Let me tell you something that somebody told me and see what you think of it, right? So
Sure.
On the other Dynasty podcast I had Alfred Fernandez from Campus to Canton on, and he said, well, pump the brakes here, right? He's a 5th-year senior and wasn't good until he was older than everybody else on the field, right? Didn't have a touchdown for like 2 years or something like that. It's still FCS, let's not get too excited. What say you?
Obviously, like I said, I think the testing makes me feel better about the FCS of it all, because I think, he's an NFL athlete. I know that a player profiler has his breakout age, which is what I normally go for when I'm trying to look at when a guy was productive, as a 20.3, which puts him like right on average. So I'm not overly concerned, but I will say I always, when I'm looking at wide receivers, especially, I'm like, seniors, I always kind of give them a little demerit there for being older than everybody. So I think that's a legitimate concern.
All right, and finally, we're going to close it out with the humdinger. You ready? So, as some of you know, I grew up in and still live in New Jersey. I finished college at Rutgers University. Rutgers University has an awful football team.
Greg Schiano.
Pretty much for the entire time that I have can remember, right? But on that awful football team, someone who excelled and was invited to the combine and ran a 4.37 at 216 pounds, Isaiah Pacheco. And I've seen him shoot up a couple boards. I'm not saying, again, that you're going to be picking him in the second round of your rookie drafts. He's going to be a 3rd, 4th round guy. But I think he could be pretty interesting, and I think he definitely sort of improved, where he would where he would fall as far as like the round that he's going to get drafted in the NFL. And I think somewhat similarly, Pierre Strong might have gone into the 4th round now with his performance. Anybody want to roast me for Isaiah Pacheco?
Absolutely not, especially if he's from your alma mater.
I can't roast you for a guy I've never heard of.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Well, I figured, we're going to talk about Willis. We're going to talk about Ritter. Let me do some Isaiah Pacheco on that ass.
No, I like the deep cut.
Yes, I love deep cuts. So let's now go back around and talk about a guy that we think maybe hurt his stock or didn't perform well or leaves us with question marks. Keith, who's your guy?
Treylon Burks, wide receiver of Arkansas. It's just such a loaded receiver class. I really do. I love this class. You look at the 40 times, the size of these guys. A lot of them had great college careers. There's a lot of things that I look for a guy to end up being successful at the next level. His 40 time was not awful. It was fine. It was just so many guys had blistering 40 times that it made his look even slower. He didn't look great in the pass catching drills, which that to me is, I know it could be nerves, but it's just that's a bad sign. You're a wide receiver. This is, what you do. You should be able to do some of that in your sleep. I should be worried about the way you're moving, not physically catching the ball. He just looks sloppy and awkward moving side to side, which again, this is the NFL. It's changing with receivers. You have to do a lot more, run after the catch, a lot more over the middle. So I think his chance of being the first receiver off the board probably ended. I think he's still going to be picked relatively high. It's just now the question is, can he be A.J. Brown? You could say a lot of the same things that I just said about him about 2 years ago, or is he going to be N'Keal Harry, who you could also have said a lot of the same things about him a few years ago. So he's the guy that I think hurt his stock a good bit.
Okay, I'm going to go with my guy that broke my heart, and that's Kyron Williams. It looked like 4.7. The official time was 4.65. When you're that and you're small, there's you're gonna slip. Now, to his credit, people say he plays faster than that. When he's in playing the game, not just like running on a track. And he's great at pass protection, and he is a good receiver. And those two things get you on the field in the NFL. So I still think he has something to contribute. I don't know that I can guarantee him in day 2 now, where I thought like that was probably almost a lock from what I saw before that, right? So Kyron, you broke my heart. All right. So we're going to quickly go to other guys that we thought maybe stood out or surprised us or are worth noting. Tyler, kick us off.
All right. I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson. He's fun to watch. He is a good player. He's a lot of people's wide receiver 1 in this class. The big question mark that I've heard about him was his speed. He plays well. He should run in the 4.5s. Can he run in the low 4.5s, run in the high 4.4s? We don't know. He goes out there and he runs faster than his teammate Chris Olave and runs a 4.38. I think, and that blew me away. He checks every other box. His route running is great. His body control is great. His hands are great. I'm feeling pretty good about Garrett Wilson after seeing that on top of all that, he has elite speed as well.
Okay. And speaking of guys you never heard about, Joe wants to tell us about another standout, Jordan Davis.
Oh yeah, Jordan Davis. Good God. I'm one of those people where you look at nose tackles and stuff, and I'm like, don't draft those guys high. And then he goes out and runs, what was it, a 4.78 at like 340 pounds?
Tried to tell you, Joe. He's a freak.
I ran the 40 one time in high school. And I think I weighed 150 pounds, and I ran a 5.12. So he more than doubled my weight and crushed my time. Mm-hmm. So I still think I worry about a guy that size being a big IDP guy. Mm-hmm. On the opposite end, though, if you're IDP, Kyle Hamilton, don't worry about that 40 time. All of the rest of his testing was elite. I think he runs faster, he plays faster than what he showed at the combine. So I wouldn't worry about that at all.
If Jorge is still watching or listening, his heart is warming right now that we're talking IDP. Speaking of IDP, we're going to do some IDP risers and fallers tomorrow night on Fourth and Frames. And there's an IDP podcast in our family, Shoot the Gap. And we're going to do an episode of IDP rookie stuff with a guest that we're still waiting to line up. And that's going to be in like 2 weeks, I think. So just let you know that we are IDP friendly for the IDP curious. Keith, anybody left on the list that you want to cross off to talk about?
Yeah, because it's the year of the dogs. First my Bulldogs finally get a national championship. Matthew Stafford wins the Super Bowl. We've got 2 Georgia Bulldogs that have won on the PGA Tour. And then the dogs showed out, and I mean showed out at this combine. Joe obviously talked about Jordan Davis, but I mean, he wasn't the only one. Pass rusher Trayvon Walker, he scored a 9.99 RAS. That is the 3rd highest rating by a defensive end out of 1,400 guys since 1989. Channing Tyndale, the linebacker, the 3rd fastest 40 at his position and highest vertical. Safety Lewis Sign ran a 4.3740. He had the best broad jump at his position. And this doesn't include standout performances by offensive guys. George Pickens looked good coming off of his injury. James Cook and Zamir White both ran fast 40s who are running back. Or the fact that first-round talent Nakobe Dean at linebacker decided he wasn't going to participate, but he's going to be a first-rounder. He's a stud. You don't understand how proud a Georgia fan after 40 years of losing is of this team, and to see all these guys ball out. And I think they're going to be stars. Like several of them are going to be stars at the next level. You want to talk about making your heart happy.
Right on. And so I'll close this out with one, maybe 2. Yeah, I'll go with 1. And that's Jelani Woods. Spent a few years at Oklahoma State. Didn't do much pass catching. People didn't see him as a pass catcher. He transferred to UVA for his last year, and they unlocked him. Had a very good season. Got on a lot of people's radars, particularly in like the C2C and Debbie community. We're talking about a guy who is 6'7" and 253, and ran the fastest 40 4.61 for a tight end his height since 2003. 24 bench press reps, first among tight ends, and is now a good receiver and looked good in the drills. In a tight end class where it's the top 2 and who the hell knows, Jelani Woods is a guy to keep your eye on in the back end of your Dynasty rookie drafts. Okay. So that pretty much does it for our post-combine reaction show. We're going to land the plane now. And let's see. Joe and Keith, plugs. What's your Twitter? Where can we find your work? What are you working on now?
I'll go ahead.
My
Twitter is at Keith Flemming, KeithFlemming. Just finished an article that was the 3 lessons that I learned in the 2021 DFS season. I believe that will be up this week.
Okay.
And then also working on some player profiles. I think what I'm going to do is just all the offensive positions, do 3 players. And I'm going to be basically broken down at each position by the can't miss guy, the boomer bust guy, and the highest upside guy. So I'm going to start with wide receiver because I love the class, but it is taking me some time to figure out what 3 guys because I like some
Yeah, that's a good problem to have. Joe?
You can find me at Joe E. Matz. So that's Joe with an extra E at the end, MATZ on Twitter. And yeah, I'm just going to be helping Keith out. We're going to be trying to, churn out some articles to complement what you guys are doing on here.
All right. Right on. And Joe and Keith, those articles, by the way, can be found on fantasyandframes.com. Will be back with us for a couple weeks as we move toward the draft, starting April 5th. we're going to do a few more rookie episodes leading up to the draft, and then a mock. And Joe and Keith will be on board for a few weeks, so they will be back. Tyler, plugs.
Hey, man, it's mostly Dynasty 365, just really getting into this. You mentioned kind of what we have going on. Next week, we're going to hit our wide receiver and tight end free agency primer, the day before free agency really hits, and get you ready for that. Going to cover some IDP stuff for Dynasty. The week after that, we're going to get into the free agency fallout, good landing spots, bad landing spots, things like that, and then really dive into these rookies. I'm ready to get to know these guys a little bit, start watching some more film on them, kind of plan out who I want to watch and when, and really get my head around these guys and be ready for these rookie drafts.
Right on. Okay, and what's your Twitter?
It is at – which side is it? There we go. Ohio.
Okay. All right.
See, Joe, that proves we're the rookies. We weren't smart enough for the stream.
You're right.
To do what they
that's-
both did.
No, that's pre-made, boys. That's
Okay,
pre-made.
all right. I was gonna say.
As it says on the screen, you can find me at ffjunkie_ on Twitter. My articles that I write and my Dynasty rankings, as well as Tyler's and a couple other Fantasy and Framers, are on fantasyandframes.com as well. What we have going on around the Fantasy and Frames podcast network. We have Fourth and Frames tomorrow. I think we have IDP the night after that on Thursday, Shoot the Gap. And, of course, we have Dynasty 365, 8:30 every Tuesday. And we're very much looking forward to Keith and Joe on the Daily Fix. All right.
I really appreciate you having us on.
You can follow the empire and watch its growth at FIF Pod Network on the Twitters. Okay. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening, folks.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.